I am the stone tucked deep into the hollow of this hillside, nestled where sheep once huddled against the cold wind of Judea. I do not move, I do not change, but I have memory not in the way you do, fleeting and flawed, but in layers, in the way time settles into stone. And I remember the silence, that long, aching silence that stretched across centuries. It weighed on me like the darkness that used to settle at dusk, heavy, thick, unbroken by voice or light. No prophecy echoed through these caverns. No sacred fire burned nearby. No priest or prophet ever lingered long. We were too ordinary, too forgotten. Even the stars seemed to pass by without looking down. But something had begun to shift, subtly, like water finding cracks in the rock. It was not noise or light that reached me first, but longing deep, pulsing yearning from the earth itself, as though creation remembered a promise older than its bones. I felt it in the sheep's restless shuffling, in the way the wind hesitated before entering the cave, in the strange hush that fell over the fields. There were whispers, yes, but not from lips, from stars, from roots, from the hush itself, as if everything that had waited was holding its breath. Then came the night, the silence broken not with thunder, but with footsteps, tired ones, slow, careful, pressing against the earth with a weight that felt more than physical. I listened as they came nearer. A man's voice, low and steady, murmured to a woman, whose breathing was labored. She was young, afraid, and so gentle. They stepped inside the cave, unsure, searching, touching the damp stone as if asking for permission to rest here. No one asked me, but I said yes anyway. Not with words. Just by receiving them, they brought nothing but what they wore. No wealth, no fire. Only hope, though I doubt they would have called it that. The man cleared a small corner. The woman sat down, folded in on herself, trembling not from cold but from something I didn't yet understand. And I watched, if such a thing can be said of stone. I watched and waited, though I didn't know what for. And as night wrapped itself tighter around us, I realized I wasn't afraid. Something was coming. Something was very near. I remember the moment, not in sound, but in weight, in warmth. The cave shifted. My core, which had known only the chill of centuries, softened. There was a cry, a newborn cry, and the air changed. The kind of change that cannot be seen, only recognized deep in whatever part of stone might be called soul. The woman held a child. She wept, though she smiled. The man's hands trembled as he touched the baby's cheek. No trumpet sounded. No fire fell from heaven. Only the soft exhale of life newly arrived. But it was enough. It was everything. For years I had wondered what it would be like if the Messiah came. Would the earth tremble? Would mountains crack? Would I split open in awe, number? He came as an infant, swaddled and silent except for that first small cry. And in that softness, I felt power. In that helplessness, I felt authority. He had no crown, but I knew he was king. I had seen many kings in stories pass between shepherds Herod, Caesar, but this was different. He did not take space with force. He made room for himself simply by being. There was no room at the inn, they had said, but here, in this forgotten place, there was room. I gave it. I, a stone, offered what palaces could not. Stillness, shelter, and silence deep enough to hear a whisper of glory. And he whispered, not in words, in presence. In that moment, I believed stones could weep, though none would ever see it. And still, I hold that night inside me, long after the child grew and left, after shepherds came and went, after the echoes faded. I remember. I keep the silence, but now it is not empty. It is holy. It waits again, not in despair, but in hope. Because if he came once, he will come again. And I, who said nothing for centuries, now wait with trembling, not from fear, from awe. Years later, others would come into this space, drawn perhaps by something they couldn't name. Children playing, lovers seeking shelter from sudden storms, travelers caught in the cold. They would sit or lean or rest their backs against me, never knowing what I had held, whom I had cradled. But some would pause longer than needed. Some would fall silent, eyes closed, breathing slower, as if the cave itself still hummed with a sacred hush. And it did. I carried the memory of that child like a flame with no smoke. burning steady in the marrow of stone. And I began to wonder, could memory be a kind of prayer? Could the very holding of a moment be holy? I had not spoken, nor sung, nor preached, yet I had held him. My only part was stillness, and somehow that had been enough, more than enough. For what greater honor can stone know than to serve as cradle for its creator? She came again, the woman, months later, carrying him in her arms, now plumper, more curious, eyes alight like the stars that had announced his birth. She leaned her head against the stone wall and sang something soft. He gurgled, tiny fingers reaching toward a shaft of light, and I felt it again, that warmth, that sense of being part of something infinitely vast and yet utterly intimate. I was not a bystander, I was a participant, and as the seasons turned, as wind reshaped the mouth of the cave, as rain softened some of my edges and time etched its patient lines across my surface, I never forgot. When the cave stood empty again, when footsteps no longer echoed within me, I held on to that night like a secret too precious to tell. But you have come now, and so I whisper it to you, as best I can. You may think you sit alone in silence. You may think the world has forgotten you, that your life is small, your space insignificant. But I tell you this, he comes not to palaces, not to thrones, not to places already full. He comes to caves, he comes to silence, he comes to hearts that wait and listen and make room. So if you hear a stillness deeper than silence, if your soul stirs without knowing why, perhaps it is him, perhaps it is time. I was a stone, and I waited, and he came. Now I wait again, not as one who doubts, but as one who remembers. I remember another night. The air was colder, the sky overcast, and the wind carried a restlessness that had not visited in some time. Shepherds again, but these were younger, more uncertain, not the ones who first saw the light break the sky. They stumbled in like boys searching for proof of an old tale, talking low, unsure if this was truly the place. One of them carried a piece of parchment with a drawing, a star, a cave, a woman, a child. They lit a small flame, its flicker dancing on my surface, and sat down without speaking. They said nothing for a long while. Then one of them placed his hand against the wall, against me, as if trying to feel something beneath the stone. He closed his eyes, whispered a name. I could not hear it, but I felt it echo within me. It was not just memory anymore, it was presence. It was as if, by remembering, they had summoned something back into the now. Not magic, not miracle, but reverence. They left the parchment tucked in a crack of my wall. I still hold it. Paper faded, ink softened, but the weight of it remains. In time, others came with books, with oil lamps, with wide eyes and steady voices. Some prayed, some sang, some wept, and some said nothing, simply sitting in silence, letting their hearts listen to what their ears could not. I never spoke to them, of course. Stones do not speak, but I offered them my story, in the only way I could, through weight, through warmth, through the hush that had once held heaven in swaddling clothes. There was a woman once, older, walking with great care and leaning on a staff. She sat beside me and said aloud, "They say this is where it happened." Her voice cracked, not from age, but from longing. She said she had lost much, that joy felt like a country she could no longer find on any map. And then she cried, not loud, not wild, just a slow, steady letting go, as if every tear had waited years for this release. I did nothing but stay, but sometimes staying is everything. And I wondered again, as I often do, why he chose a place like this. Why not a hall lined with gold, or a sanctuary guarded by fire? Why not somewhere grand enough to declare his divinity? But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps he comes not to impress, but to invite, not to overwhelm, but to draw near. And those who come here, they do not come to see greatness, they come to meet gentleness. A gentleness strong enough to hold the weight of sorrow without breaking, a presence quiet enough to hear a broken soul whisper. There are moments, still, when the wind brings with it the scent of sheep, the sound of a lullaby half remembered. And I wonder if those sounds are from the past, or if they are echoes from eternity folding in on the now. For this place does not simply remember a night, it remembers a beginning. The beginning of hope wearing human skin, of God nestled into straw, of eternity cradled by time. I have held other things since then: rain, snow, moss, even the footprints of children playing shepherd, but none stayed with me like that night. It was not what I expected, but it is what changed me. And though I remain the same in shape and stone, I am no longer the same within. I was common, now I am consecrated. I was still, now I am sanctuary. You who listen now, who imagine me as cold and lifeless, let me tell you I am not lifeless. I have known life, I have held it. I have felt the breath of heaven exhale against my surface, and the weight of love so gentle it did not press down, it lifted. I have been the background of a story that reshaped the world, not with might, but with mercy. So come, sit, listen not with ears, but with your being. Do not be afraid of the silence. It is not empty, it is waiting, like I waited, like the world once waited, waiting for a whisper to become a word, for a presence to become a person, for the unseen to become flesh. Tremble not in fear, but in recognition. For once you have held the infinite, even silence has weight, even stillness has a sound. I have no voice, and yet I have told this story over and over, to wind, to time, to memory, and now, to you, you who are weary, you who wonder if the sacred could ever come so close. It can, it did, and it does still. I have watched centuries rise and fall. I have seen soldiers march past, their footsteps urgent, their eyes looking only forward. I have seen lovers carve names in my walls, believing themselves eternal. I have seen children run laughter through the air like thread through cloth, stitching joy into this space. And always, always, I remember. My memory does not fade, it deepens. And that memory, that keeping, is my prayer. I offer it not with words, but with presence, with openness, with the way I still hold space, the way I welcome, the way I do not forget. For he came here once, and I was here. And though I am nothing more than stone, that moment made me holy. Perhaps you think you are too small to be remembered, that your story is too quiet to matter. But I tell you, he comes into quiet. He chooses smallness. He enters the unnoticed and transforms it, not by changing its shape, but by entering it completely, like he did with me, like he longs to do with you. So do not rush past the silent places. Do not overlook the ordinary. For the holy has a habit of hiding in the humble, and glory, I have found, is not always loud. Sometimes it is as soft as a newborn's cry, as warm as a mother's breath, as simple as a father's hand reaching toward straw. And sometimes it lingers in stone, waiting not to be found, but to be felt, by those willing to pause, to kneel, to listen. If you do, perhaps you'll hear what I once heard. Perhaps you'll feel what I once held, and you will never be the same. There is something you should know about being a stone. We do not forget, not because we try to remember, but because we are made to hold. We carry time in layers, weight in silence, history in stillness. I once thought my task was only to endure till remain. But that night taught me otherwise. That night taught me to notice, and in the years that followed, I began to notice more. I noticed how the light returned differently each morning, as if the sun, remembering what had happened here, cast its rays with reverence, stretching gently through the cave's mouth, brushing my surface like a priest anointing the altar. I noticed how birds perched near the opening no longer sang loudly, but offered quiet chirps, as though the very air around this space asked for gentleness. And I noticed people. So many people. They came in ones and twos, sometimes in groups, some with sandals worn thin from pilgrimage, others with clothes too fine for dusty roads. Some knelt quickly, crossing themselves with practiced ritual. Others hesitated, unsure if they were allowed to be here, unsure if they believed any of it. But they came, they always came, and I watched. Some carried burdens you could almost feel hanging in the air behind them. Grief shaped their shoulders, sorrow in their eyes. I heard a woman whisper names of her children lost, estranged, waiting. I felt a man place his hand against me and breathe out the kind of sigh that comes when words run out. I saw lovers hold each other and say nothing, and I saw loners come with eyes red and stories unspoken. What moved me most were the ones who stayed, not long in hours, but long in presence. They didn't rush. They didn't reach for answers. They simply were. They sat. They wept. They breathed. And I recognized something in their silence, a kinship. We were the same, holding, bearing, remembering. And I began to realize that though the night of his birth had passed, the story was still unfolding. That every person who came here wasn't coming to see the past, but to meet something present. They weren't tourists of history. They were pilgrims of longing. And somehow, in ways I can't explain, he met them here. Not visibly, not audibly, but truly. I knew it by the way they left. They never left the same. Some walked lighter, some slower. Some looked back one last time as if reluctant to part. Some left something behind, a scrap of cloth, a letter folded tight, a stone placed with care beside me. I held those offerings as I had held him, gently, quietly, as if they, too, were sacred. There was a young man once, barely more than a boy. He came after sunset, alone. I remember the way he walked fast, like he was afraid of being seen. He didn't kneel, he didn't pray. He just stood, looking around as if unsure why he had come. Then, slowly, he sat down, pulled a small bundle from his cloak, and unwrapped it. Inside was a tiny pair of sandals, worn, cracked, impossibly small. He held them for a long time. Then he said, "She would have been 3 today." Just that. And then he laid the sandals at the edge of the cave, leaned back against me, and closed his eyes. No more words, no crying, just breathing, deep, heavy, human. He stayed through the night. And when he left, he did not take the sandals. I still keep them. I hold them, as I held him, as I hold every offering made not out of obligation, but out of love. I used to think only sacred things could make a place holy. But now I understand it's the wounds we bring, the questions we carry, the longing we dare to place in the open. That's what he came for. Not for the whole, but for the broken. Not to be admired from afar, but to be touched by those who dare to come close. And so I keep watching, not because I expect to see him again in swaddling clothes, but because I know he comes still in the silent, the sorrowful, the seeking. Waiting is no longer a burden to me. It is a posture, a way of believing without needing proof, a way of loving without demanding answers. I have waited through drought and storm, through centuries of change, through laughter and lament. I have watched empires fall, tongues shift, rituals evolve. Yet through it all, the whisper remains. The same one I heard the night he came, the same one that says, "I am with you." Once, a small child wandered into the cave, separated from her family for just a moment. She didn't cry. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the ground and spoke to the air. "Are you here?" she asked. "Mama says this is where Jesus was born." She tilted her head as if listening. Then she smiled, not the smile of a child playing pretend, but one who feels something real. "Okay," she said, "I'll wait with you." And she did, until her parents came running in, breathless and relieved. She took their hands, looked once more into the shadows, and whispered, "I'm glad I came." And I wondered, what did she hear that they didn't? What presence did she feel that others missed? Children have a way of knowing what adults forget, that the holy is often quiet. That God is not found in noise, but in nearness. And this place, however weathered, however small, still holds nearness. Even now, as time keeps winding forward, as fewer voices speak of caves and mangers, as stories grow dim beneath new lights, I remain. I remember, not because remembering is my purpose, but because love leaves marks even on stone. And this place was marked by love, not loud, not proud, but real. So come again, come tired, come unsure. Come not because you believe, but because you want to. Come because you're angry. Come because you're broken. Come because you've forgotten what it means to be seen. I do not promise answers, but I promise presence, his, mine, ours. And when you go, take nothing but the silence. Let it echo in you. Let it soften your edges. Let it make room, because he still comes, and I still wait. The years went on, and I began to learn that waiting is not passive. It is not an emptiness, but a fullness held in stillness. Like the earth before spring, like a womb before birth. And in this waiting, I have watched not just the comings and goings of people, but the quiet transformation of the cave itself. What once was simply shelter for sheep became a sanctuary. The dust that settled here carries prayers. The air that moves through bears witness. Even silence here speaks. There was a man, middle-aged, weathered, quiet. He came not on pilgrimage, but by accident. A detour, a missed turn. He walked in hesitantly, holding a guidebook he had not planned to use. When he stepped inside, he didn't look around right away. He just stood still, as if something had stopped him in his tracks. Then, slowly, he sat. No camera, no pen, just stillness. After a long while, he whispered, "I don't know why I'm here." And I, though I could not speak, wanted to say, "You are here because he still calls." He returned the next day, and the day after. Always alone, never staying long. But each time, he would sit in the same spot, hands open, eyes closed. I could feel Ithi's ache. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, the kind that has no language. On the fourth day, he brought a small box. Inside it was a necklace, a delicate, silver, obviously worn often. He held it in his palm, then pressed it into the earth beside me. It was hers, he said. She loved Christmas, said this was her favorite story. Then he left without ceremony, the kind of leaving that says nothing more needs to be said. That box remains here, buried but not lost, known only to me and to the one who sees even what's hidden. And I have come to believe that these offerings, these silent sacraments, are not left behind as much as they are given over, surrendered, entrusted. And in that surrender, something sacred happens. Pain is not erased, but it is held, and in the holding, it is transfigured. Once, there was a storm, fierce, sudden, the kind that makes even shepherds tremble. The cave filled with wind and dust. Voices outside shouted, scattered, called for one another. And then, as the storm howled, a woman rushed in with 2 children clinging to her cloak. They were soaked, shivering, afraid. She gathered them in a corner and whispered calming words I could barely make out. She rocked them, hummed something soft, and in the thunder's rage, she told them the story. She didn't read it from a book. She told it from her heart. About a night long ago, when another storm had raged not in sky, but in hearts. A storm of waiting, of longing, of needing rescue. And how in that night, light had come not through fire, but through birth. Not in the shout of a king, but in the cry of a child. As she spoke, the children calmed. One of them reached out and touched my surface, tracing cracks as if they were paths in a story. The storm eventually passed. They left, but the song she whispered remained. And I wonder now if that is part of the miracle, that this cave has become a place where storms are stilled, not by walls, but by presence, by the echo of a night that changed everything, a night where glory tucked itself into humility and wrapped itself in the ordinary. I am not sacred because of what I am. I am sacred because of who came here and who keeps coming still. There was once a group of students, noisy, bright-eyed, carrying notebooks and questions. Their teacher guided them gently, speaking of geography, of history, of traditions. But one boy, quiet and lanky, lingered behind. He didn't write anything, didn't ask a single question. He just sat, knees drawn up, staring into the dim. When the group left, he stayed a moment longer, then stood and whispered, "So it's true." Not a question, a declaration. I wanted to answer, yes, but the air did it for me. He ran to catch up with the others, but I know he left different, changed not by knowledge, but by knowing. And so it goes. Generation after generation, footsteps fall where once hooves tread, questions rise where once silence reigned, and every now and then, someone meets more than memory here. They meet mystery, not a puzzle to solve, but a presence to surrender to. I have come to believe that this place is not merely visited, it is received. To enter here is to cross a threshold not just of stone, but of soul. For though walls do not speak, they remember. And I, more than wall, more than stone, I have become witness. not just to what was, but to what is possible when heaven brushes earth. There is a moss that grows in one corner of the cave, soft and bright, even in shadow. Pilgrims sometimes reach out to touch it, surprised by its life. I often think it is a parable life growing in the forgotten, green rising from gray, and perhaps that is the secret this place keeps whispering, that nothing is too hard for life to return, not even stone, not even sorrow. I remember the first time someone laughed here. It startled me. It had been so long since joy made itself heard within these walls. A father, carrying a baby girl, began to bounce her gently. She squealed. Then Lafita's sound so full, so pure, it made even the shadows seem to lift. The parents laughed too, unsure why it felt sacred, only knowing it did. That laughter lingers. Even now, it rings in memory like a bell that needs no striking. You may think this is only stone. You may think faith must live in books, in temples, in doctrine. But I tell you, sometimes faith lives in caves. Sometimes it lives in the silence between questions, in the breath drawn just before the prayer begins, in the spaces we do not name but enter anyway. He was here, and when he was, everything changed. And because he was, I am not just what I seem. Neither are you. You who read this, who listen to these words carried not on wind but on wonder paws. What are you holding that needs laying down? What ache have you hidden so long it has become part of your name? Come, even if just in imagination, and lay it here. I will hold it. I will not break. Because I have learned from the one who came, the one who asked for no throne, needed no torch, claimed no army, only a womb, a manger, and a moment. And because he came, I, forgotten stone in a forgotten cave have become the first to cradle eternity made flesh. So if you wonder whether he sees you, come. If you doubt whether he understands you, come. If you fear your silence is too long, your sorrow too deep, your questions too dangerous, come. This cave has heard it all, and still he came, and still he comes. I have come to understand that time does not pass here in the same way it does elsewhere. In the world beyond this cave, clocks tick and calendars turn. Here, time folds in on itself. The past breathes in the present echoes the eternal. One moment here can hold 1,000 years, and 1,000 years can feel like a moment. It is not because I am stone, it is because he came, and his coming redefined time itself. The first winter after that holy night, the cave was quiet again. The child had gone, the family moved on, and I remained, still and watchful. Yet I was not the same. The cold no longer felt quite so bitter. The shadows no longer seemed so heavy. Something of him had stayed, not as a memory, but as presence, the kind that lingers in spaces long after feet have walked away, the kind that turns ordinary ground into holy. I remember the day a soldier came, not in armor, not with weapons. He was older than most I'd seen, worn, limping, eyes too tired for battle. He entered with caution, not as a conqueror, but as one conquered by something unseen. He sat, stretched out his injured leg, and leaned his head back against me. Then, slowly, he pulled a scrap of cloth from his tunic blue, frayed, stained with time. He unfolded it with shaking hands. Inside was a small carved figure, a baby, wooden, rough, missing one arm. He whispered, "My mother gave this to me, said it would protect me." He chuckled, though there was no joy in it. It didn't. Then silence. A long, heavy silence that did not accuse or question. It simply was. And in that silence, I sensed something in him break not loudly, but in the way stone erodes. Gradual. I wished I could speak, not to give answers, but to tell him he wasn't alone, but I didn't need to. He wasn't. Not truly. That silence held more than pain. It held him. The soldier placed the figure on the ground, looked at it for a long while, then stood and limped away. He left it behind. And I, who had once cradled the real child, now cradled the carved one, not as replacement, as reminder. A piece of longing turned into form. It happens often, these offerings, each one different. A poem scribbled in a language I do not know, a bracelet, a single olive, a stone from a far-off shore. I have no hands, but I hold them. I have no heart, but I carry their ache. And I believe, truly, that he sees everyone. There was a woman silent, stern, hands clenched. She stood for hours, did not kneel, did not cry, just stood, as if fighting not to believe, not to hope. But something in her shifted. I felt it. She took a small photo from her coat. A boy, maybe 8 years old. She didn't speak, just looked at it, then tucked it into a crack in the wall beside me. Not goodbye, not surrender, just trust. The kind that doesn't need words. And I wonder, often, why they come. What draws them to this cave where nothing moves, where no relic gleams, where the story is so old it barely makes sense in the noise of their world. But they come from villages and cities, from deserts and forests, with accents I've never heard, with wounds too deep for song. And they come not for spectacle, they come for stillness. They come because something in them remembers, not the details, perhaps, but the truth beneath the story. The truth that light once entered darkness in a way no shadow could overcome. That God chose straw, not marble, dirt, not throne. That holiness was once held in the hush of a cave. And so they sit, they listen, and sometimes they hear. One day, a group of travelers arrived late, just as dusk folded the hills into silence. They were artists, carrying sketchbooks and cameras, their eyes quick, their steps reverent. Most began drawing the cave, the contours, the way the last light kissed the rock. But one woman did not draw. She sat in the far corner, facing inward, away from the view. Her eyes were closed, her lips moved, though no sound came. Later, when the others left, she remained. I saw her open her eyes, wide and wet, and whisper, "I don't need to see to remember." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a lump of clay. With careful fingers, she began shaping. Slowly, without rushing. And though her hands were skilled, her touch was tender, almost hesitant. What she formed was not a face, not a figure, but something like a womb open, hollow, waiting. She placed it before me, then pressed her forehead to the ground. "This," she said, "is all I have." And it was enough, more than enough, for in that act, I saw what this cave had always meant to be: not a place of answers, but a place of offering, a space for waiting, for holding, for shaping the unseen into something we dare to touch. I wish I could tell them all that they are not alone, that the ache they carry is not shame, but invitation, that the emptiness they fear is the very place He chooses to fill. I cannot speak, but I can be, and sometimes being is the greatest witness of all. There is moss growing on me now where none once did, a green, stubborn life that refuses to retreat. Children sometimes pick at it, laughing, and I do not mind. Let them laugh, let them touch, let them play where angels once sang. For the one who came as a child must surely smile when joy fills the space he once filled with breath. And you, if you have come this far into the story, know this: there is nothing too small, too broken, too forgotten to be holy. Even a stone can hold glory, even silence can carry presence. Even a cave can become cathedral. So bring what you carry, leave what you must, and listen, He is near. Still, there are nights when no one comes. Nights when the wind is too sharp, the road too long, the world too loud. On those nights, the cave rests in silence and eats stone heartless to the breath of the earth. I do not sleep, for stone does not slumber, but I enter a stillness so deep it feels like prayer. And in that quiet, I remember, not just the holy night when He was born, but all the nights that came after. Nights when His absence felt louder than His arrival. Nights when hope flickered like a candle in a storm. Nights when His story seemed forgotten, buried beneath empire and noise, and the ache of waiting hearts. But even then, He came, not as before, not as child wrapped in swaddling, but in the shape of love poured out, in bread broken, in tears shared, in feet washed and strangers welcomed, in wounds offered and risen light. And so I learned that His coming was not just a moment, it was a movement, a rhythm that pulses still through the world, through time, through even stone. A priest once came, long ago, robes dusty, eyes tired from travel. He entered with a sigh and sat beside me, letting his whole body rest against my side. He didn't light incense. He didn't open a book. He just said, "I don't know anymore." Then, after a long pause, "But I'm here." He stayed the night, and before dawn, he took off the stole from his shoulders, kissed it, and laid it over me like a blanket. "You remember better than I do," he said. "So hold this for me until I can believe again." I have kept it ever since. This cave has become a keeper of belief, even for those who cannot hold it themselves. For faith is not always loud. Sometimes it is fragile, fractured, borrowed. Sometimes it is nothing more than the act of showing up, of sitting in silence and letting the stones believe for you. I have come to treasure those who arrive not with answers, but with ache, not with creeds, but with questions. For they come not to explain God, but to encounter Him. And those who seek with empty hands often leave most full. There was a young girl once, no more than 12, who came in alone. She wore no shoes, only thin socks, and her coat was too big. She sat on the ground and pulled a notebook from her sleeve. She didn't look around, didn't take photos. She began to write, page after page, her pencil flying, her brow furrowed not in confusion but in urgency. When she finished, she tore the pages out, folded them carefully, and tucked them beneath a stone. Before she left, she whispered, "If you're real, I'll know because you'll keep this safe." I do, not because I understand, but because I was made to hold. And maybe that is why I remain, why this cave remains not because of what we are, but because of what we are willing to carry. And so I carry stories, whispers, breath. I carry the echo of angels and the lullabies of mothers. I carry the scent of oil once poured in love, and the salt of tears cried in secret. I carry the groan of the earth, and the silence of heaven waiting to speak. This place has become a threshold, not just of space, but of soul, a place where people cross from noise into hush, from distance into nearness, from ache into surrender. Some come only once and never return. Some come year after year, their faces changing, their steps slower. Some come with questions, others with wounds, and some with thanksgiving. But all, in some way, come to meet the mystery. And I, though unchanging, have been changed. Once, after many years, an old woman came with a basket of flowers fresh, wild, gathered by hand. She did not place them at the front where most visitors gather. She came deeper into the cave, knelt by my side, and one by one, laid each flower upon the ground. She said no words, only wept, not a bitter weeping, but one full of knowing. Her tears were not grief, they were memory, rising. After she had laid the final flower, she whispered, "You were here before me, you'll be here after." Then she smiled. "But for now, we are here together." And she stayed. She stayed until the sun climbed high, until the shadows moved, until the flowers began to dry. Then she kissed the stone and left, and her presence lingers still. I remember her even now, and I remember that smile, not of victory or clarity, but of communion. There are those who think only the loud can change the world, but I have seen what quiet can do. I have seen how a whisper can cradle a life, how stillness can carry truth. I have seen that the gentlest presence can bear the heaviest burden, that a manger cradled more than a child, it cradled all our longing. You who read this may never come here. You may never sit in this cave. Press your palm to my side, whisper your ache into the hush, but you are not far. This cave is not about geography, it is about encounter. And wherever your heart makes space for Him, that space becomes Bethlehem. I remain, not to be revered, but to remind. I hold, not to possess, but to offer. I wait, not out of weariness, but out of love. For I believe He still comes, not just to caves, but to hearts. Not just to the silent, but to the seeking. And when He does, the world will shift again. Not with fanfare, but with the hush of heaven drawing near. So listen. He is close. Long before the child came, I was here rough, unshaped, unnoticed. A hollow in the side of a hill, known only to shepherds and sheep. No one called me sacred. I was just shelter, a pocket of shadow, a pause in the wilderness. But after that night, everything changed. And yet, strangely, nothing did. The cave stayed small. The stones did not shine. No stars remained fixed above, but something had shifted in how the world entered this space. As if the ordinary had become enough. Over the years, I have watched many struggle with that truth. They come expecting signs, wonders, voices from clouds. They come looking for certainty, but what they find is silence, stone, dust. And at first, that silence unsettles them. It is not what they came for. It is not what they plan. But if they stay, if they sit, if they breathe, if they dare to let the silence speak, they leave changed. A man once came at midnight, alone. His steps were unsure, as if drawn by something he couldn't name. He brought no offering, no camera, no prayer book. He simply sat. For hours, he sat. Then, just before dawn, he stood and whispered, "So this is what mercy feels like." He didn't say it to anyone in particular, but I heard, and the silence did too. That word stayed with me. Mercy. I had never thought of myself in those terms. I was stone unmoving, unfeeling, and yet, if mercy could take shape, perhaps it would be this: a space where pain is not hurried, where questions are allowed, where presence is enough. And maybe that is what I offer, not answers, not miracles, but mercy and stillness. There is a small crack near the back wall. Most don't notice it, but some do. They press tiny slips of paper into it: names, prayers, regrets. I cannot read, but I hold them. Some are brittle with age, the ink faded. Some are fresh, still trembling from the hand that placed them. Each one is a part of the story now, and I, in my silence, keep them safe. Once, a child asked her father, "Why is it still here? Why didn't they build something grand?" The father paused, looked around, then said, "Because some things are truer when they stay small." I think he was right. The world often forgets what small can do, but I have seen the small change the world. I have seen how a child's breath can still storms, how a whisper can awaken belief, how a manger in a cave can carry the weight of heaven. And so I remain, not because I am grand, but because I am enough for him, and maybe just Maybeno for you too. One afternoon, when the sun was high and the heat pressed even the birds into silence, a man entered carrying nothing but a cane. He was old, his back bent, his steps deliberate. He moved slowly, as though each step was not just walking but remembering. He reached the center of the cave and looked around, then up. "I was here when I was a boy," he said aloud. "I didn't understand then." He sat down on the ground, his cane beside him, and rested his hands on his knees. "Now I do." He didn't say what he understood, but he didn't need to. Some understanding is too deep for words. It is carried in the breath, in the silence between heartbeats, in the tears that fall without explanation. He stayed for a long time, unmoving. Then, as the light began to shift, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of fabric. He kissed it and placed it beside me. "She always believed," he said, "so I'll believe too." Then he stood and walked away, steadier than when he'd arrived. The cave is filled with these moments. Quiet sacraments, hidden liturgies, no choir, no incense, no polished marble-only stone, and memory and presence. I am not a cathedral. I am not a temple. I am not even particularly beautiful, but I have become a vessel, not by design, but by grace. There was once a group of musicians who came to record the sound of silence. They brought microphones, equipment, delicate instruments of their craft. They spoke in whispers, adjusting cables, waiting for the perfect quiet. And when they finally recorded, it was not silence they captured, but breath. The breath of the cave, the breath of the world, a low hum, ancient and alive. When they played it back, one of them began to cry. "It sounds like someone is still here," she said. And I wanted to say, "Yes, he is." You may wonder why this matters, why a cave should carry such weight. But it's not about the cave. It never was. It's about what happened here, who happened here, the child who changed everything, the love that dared to come small, the mercy that still echoes. So if you are weary, if the road has been long, if your prayers feel unanswered and your hope thin, come to the place that does not demand, but receives, that does not speak, but listens. Come not to find something new, but to remember what has always been true, that he came, and that he comes still. Even now, in the deepest hours of the night, when no footstep disturbs the dust and the hills sleep under stars, I wait, not out of duty, out of love, because I have learned that holy things begin in hidden places, that sometimes the most eternal truths are whispered, not shouted, that even a cave can cradle the divine. I am not special, but he made me sacred, and if he could choose me, he can choose you too. Not once, not long ago, but today, now. So come, sit, be still, he is near. Sometimes the hardest thing is not to believe in what happened, but in what is still happening. That he was born, I have no doubt. I felt his weight upon me, heard his cry, held his warmth, but that he is still being born in hearts, in hopes, in places forgotten, that is the mystery I witness now, and it is no less holy. A woman once entered with a child held tightly to her chest. The boy was small, restless, unfamiliar with silence. He squirmed and fussed, his tiny hands grasping for something unseen. The mother did not hush him. Instead, she held him closer and said, "This is where he was, little one, long ago. This is where the world turned quiet so God could speak small." Her words caught me. Speak small. I had never thought of speech that way, but Yesmal is how he speaks. Through newborn breath, through broken bodies, through quiet hearts. The boy calmed eventually, not because he understood, but because she did. She sat for a long while, rocking him gently, whispering songs too soft for the world to hear, songs of hope, of waiting, of peace. And I listened, as I always do. The child fell asleep in her arms. She did not move. She simply let the moment stretch until it became sacred. That is the gift of stillness, not absence, but presence stretched wide. Another man came weeks later, ragged and alone. He looked like someone who had not spoken in days, maybe weeks. He carried no bag, only a stick, carved with markings I couldn't decipher. He leaned it against the wall and stood facing the center of the cave. "I don't know what I'm doing here," he said aloud, "but something told me to come." He walked slowly, circling the edges, touching the walls, the floor, as if expecting them to answer. They didn't, but silence has its own reply. After a time, he sat and wept, not the sharp weeping of immediate pain, but the low, unending kind. Grief, yes, but more than grief, weariness, loss, regret, and still he wept. When he finished, he stood, wiped his face with his sleeve, and said, "I think I'll try again." Then he picked up his stick and left. That is what this place does. It does not fix, it invites. It does not preach, it holds. And in the holding, it heals not instantly, not fully, but deeply. I have held broken things, broken hopes, broken dreams, broken faith. And each, somehow, finds room here. Because the one who came was broken too, not in spirit, but in body. Wounded for love, pierced for peace. And in his wounding, the world found a way home. Sometimes children come with their schools, filing in like curious streams of laughter and wide-eyed wonder. Most look around, squinting in the dim, whispering questions. Is this really the place? Did he cry? Was he cold? Their teachers try to explain, but children don't need explanations. They need space, and here they find it. One girl, quiet and apart from the others, knelt near the front and touched the ground. She didn't say anything, just traced a line in the dust. Then she looked up and smiled, not at the teacher, not at her friends, but at the air, as if something invisible had smiled back. She left no note, no mark. But I remember her, the way joy hovered around her like a hush of light. That's the thing about this place, it remembers. Not with words, but with presence. Not with judgment, but with gentleness. What is left here becomes part of me, not as burden, but as gift. I am not worn down by what I hold. I am made more whole. And you, who are reading this, may wonder how stone can know these things, how silence can speak. But it is not about me, it is about him, about the way his love entered not through noise, but through need, through vulnerability, through a night no one expected and a place no one chose. except him. He chose this. He chose here. He chose small and quiet and low, so we would know that nothing is beneath his presence, not even stone. And so I remain, to remind you, to tell you, in the only way I know, that the story is still unfolding, that hope still begins in hush, that peace still grows in places left behind, that love, real love, still chooses the low and the lost. So come, bring your questions, your longings, your tired prayers. You do not have to speak, you only need to stay. He is here, still, even now, in seasons when the world forgets how to be still. I remember the hush that fell over the hills that night, the breathless waiting, the quiet wonder, and I remember that it did not end when the shepherds left or the stars moved on. It echoes still, in every soul that sits in silence and dares to hope again. So if you find yourself longing not for answers, but for presence, come. If your faith feels frayed, if your strength feels thin, if your heart aches with questions you cannot name, come. This is the place where the holy met the humble, where God slipped quietly into skin. This is the place where glory did not shout, but sighed. And he is still here, not just in caves, but in you. All you need to do is stop and listen. There is a kind of silence that holds rather than hides, a silence that speaks not in words but in weight, in presence. This is the silence I have known since that night. It did not leave when the shepherds left, or when the family journeyed onward. It stayed, and in staying, it changed everything. Many come here expecting to feel something grand, a miracle, a vision, a sudden certainty. But what they find instead is this silence. And at first, it disappoints, feels too plain, too empty. But if they stay long enough, if they listen without demanding, something begins to shift. The silence begins to feel full, alive, as though it is not empty at all, but waiting, holding, becoming. A pilgrim once came and sat for 3 days. He ate little, spoke to no one, just sat, still, breathing. On the final morning, he stood and whispered, "I didn't find what I was looking for, but I found what I needed." Then he smiled, placed a single stone on the ground, and left. I still hold that stone. It's not about what people bring, it's about what they leave behind. Not their possessions, but their pretending, their defenses, their noise. They leave it here, sometimes without knowing. And when they do, something opens. Not the cave, themselves. I have watched souls open. I have watched hearts soften. I have seen people come brittle and leave breathing again, not because of me, because he is still here, not in body, but in breath, not in form, but in fullness. A woman once lit a candle and placed it in a niche near the wall. She sat beside it and stared into the flame for hours. When it burned low, she blew it out gently and whispered, "That's all I needed." Then she walked away. The air still smelled of wax and prayer. That scent lingered for days, the scent of surrender. Sometimes a man with a broom comes to sweep the dust. He is gentle, reverent. He doesn't rush. I think he knows that even the dust carries story, that even the smallest fragment might hold grace. He once found a note tucked under a rock. It read, "Forgive me." He didn't read more. He didn't need to. He placed it back and whispered, "You are." These are not loud things. They are not dramatic. They are barely seen, but they are holy, and they are real. One night, the stars were especially clear. The hills outside shimmered under their light. A young man came running, breathless, as if chased not by danger, but by need. He stumbled into the cave, dropped to his knees, and cried out, "I don't know what to do." The cave answered only in silence, and yet he stayed, curled into the earth, fists pressed to the ground. After a long time, he uncurled, sat back, and whispered, "But you do." Then he wept, not in despair, in release. The next morning, he returned with a small piece of paper. He placed it beside me. On it, in shaky handwriting, were 4 words, "Thank you for staying." I wish I could have answered him, but maybe I did. Maybe just being here, still, was answer enough. That's what this cave does. It waits. It receives. It remembers. Not in the way people remember, with stories and dates, but with presence. I do not forget, because I do not turn away. There are days when no one comes, when the wind howls outside and dust gathers thick. On those days, I remember everyone who has ever sat here, the ones who sang, the ones who wept, the ones who dared to believe. I remember their voices, their breaths, their stories, and I hold them still. A boy once left a small drawing crude, joyful, bursting with color. It showed a star, a manger, and a smiling baby. He wrote, "This is for Jesus. I hope he likes it." I think he did. I think he still does. This place is not about sadness. It is about presence, about return, about the deep, steady truth that God came. Not once, not briefly, but for good. And that truth rests here like a heartbeat in the stone. You may never come to this place, but still, it waits for you. Not in geography, but in grace. It is the part of your soul that longs without words, the ache that asks without sound, and the hope that answers in stillness. So if you are searching, keep walking. If you are breaking, keep breathing. If you are tired, come rest. Not everything holy makes noise. Some things, some of the most beautiful things only whisper, and in that whisper, He is near. Even in the quietest hours, when the world sleeps and only the moon keeps watch, I know this truth. He is not finished. His story is not over. It continues in every soul that dares to believe, in every heart that breaks open to love, in every moment made sacred by grace. I have seen what faith looks like when it has no words. I have felt the weight of surrender, the breath of hope, the warmth of tears. I have held the sacred in silence, and I will hold it still. Because He came, because He comes, because real love never leaves. And so I remain, a cave, a cradle, a witness, waiting, still. And if ever you wonder whether your story matters, whether your pain has a place, whether your longing is seen, remember this cave. Not because it is great, but because it was chosen. And so are you. Come as you are. That is enough. They say stories end, but I do not believe that. Not the real ones. The real stories continue not in the same form, but in the way they echo, the way they shape the silence, the way they are remembered not just in words, but in the rhythm of breath, in the way light leans through stone, in the hush that lingers when someone dares to believe again. This is not the end of my story, nor of his, nor of yours. A family once came at dusk, just as the wind turned cool. The father carried a lantern, the mother carried a child, and the child carried a small wooden cross. They did not speak much, they simply sat. The child walked up to me, placed the cross gently at my base, then turned and ran back. He did not look back. He didn't need to. Later, when they rose to leave, the father paused, turned to the child, and asked, "Do you know why this place matters?" The child nodded. Because he was here. And then after a long breath, and he still is. That is the truth that lives here, that what was once is still, that the one who came in flesh comes now in presence, that what seemed like the smallest act birth in a cave is still unfolding, reshaping everything. I have seen what the world calls forgotten become holy. I have watched empty hands become offerings. I have held the prayers of those who no longer had words. And I have learned that nothing is wasted, not longing, not pain, not silence, especially not silence. There is a stone, cracked and weathered, near my entrance. Visitors often trip over it or step around it. Few notice, but once, a girl knelt beside it and traced the crack with her finger. "Even broken things belong here," she whispered, and I wanted to sing, but I did not need to. The stone, her whisper, the breath between them, that was the song. So many have come, so many still will, and yet I remember each one, not in a list, in presence, in the way the air shifts when they sit, in the way the dust settles after they rise, in the way their silence touches mine. This cave was not chosen for beauty. It was chosen for availability, for willingness, for emptiness, and in that emptiness, fullness entered. That is the pattern he repeats, not once, always. There was a woman who returned every year, always in the same month, always at the same hour. She came alone, carried no bag, wore the same coat, no matter the season. She never spoke, just sat. Once, I felt her lean her forehead against the wall and sigh. It was the kind of sigh that carries decades. Then she left a small pebble at my base and walked away. Year after year, she did the same. No words, just presence. After she stopped coming, others noticed the pile of pebbles. Some added their own. Now, a small mound rises where none was planned. It is not marked, not famous, but it is holy. A quiet altar of remembering. I have learned that the holiest things are often unnoticed. That heaven leans closest where no one is looking. That glory walks not on marble, but on dust. He proved that, with every step he took, every breath he shared, every moment he lived among us, not above us. And now, still, he lives, in us, through us, among us. One evening, a group of strangers came from many nations. Their languages were different, but their reverence was the same. One by one, they each lit a small candle and placed it near the manger site. The light grew gently until the cave glowed. No one spoke. They simply stood, hands folded, eyes wide. When the last candle was lit, an old man said in a whisper, "This is what the world could be." And for a moment, it was. You who read this may never step inside this cave, but the cave can step inside you. Every time you welcome, every time you forgive, every time you believe. When believing is hard, you become Bethlehem, you become manger, you become miracle. And maybe that is the point, that he is not asking us to visit him, he is asking to dwell in us. So do not wait for perfection, do not wait until you are ready. He came into the mess, into the dark, into the silence, and he will come again, not just at the end of time, but now, here, in the quiet you carry. All he asks is space. And so, I remain, a cave once empty, now filled, a silence once hollow, now hallowed, a place once passed by, now passed through by eternity. Not the end, but a beginning, always. There is no sign above my entrance, no fanfare, no trumpet, just stone and breath, just the memory of a night when everything changed and nothing looked different. But if you come near, if you listen not with ears but with heart, you will hear it too, that gentle whisper, that still, small voice. I am here, and that is enough. For love does not need to be loud, it only needs to be true. So take this story, not as a relic, but as a rhythm. Let it echo in your silence, let it shape your waiting, let it draw you to wonder. Because even now, the story continues, and he is still coming. Do not be afraid of the quiet, it is where he begins, always has been. Let it be so again. Come and be still.